Three bikers desecrated a veterans cemetery looking for trouble. Instead, they encountered a legendary Navy SEAL. What happened next would unravel a classified military tech heist, expose a shadow intelligence network, and teach the Crimson Scythes motorcycle gang why disturbing hallowed ground becomes your final mistake. Before we continue with this shocking story, tell us where you're watching from. If you want more incredible true stories like this, hit that subscribe button. The autumn wind whispered through the ancient cedars of Silvermist Veterans Memorial Gardens, carrying with it the soft rustle of fallen leaves across perfectly aligned headstones. Commander Lysandra Thorne knelt before a weathered granite marker, her calloused fingers tracing the engraved name with reverence. After 15 years of classified operations and missions that would never see the light of day, this peaceful cemetery had become her sanctuary. The morning mist clung to the rolling hills, creating an ethereal backdrop for the thousands of white markers standing in eternal formation. Lysandra adjusted her leather jacket, unconsciously covering the sealed trident tattoo that marked her as one of the elite few. Director Octavia Ravenscroft, the silver-haired cemetery administrator, approached with quiet steps that spoke of years paying respect to the fallen. "You're here early again, Commander," Octavia said softly, her voice carrying the weight of someone who understood the burden of service. "The grounds don't officially open for another hour." "The dead keep their own hours, Octavia," Lysandra replied, her eyes never leaving the headstone. "And please, just Lysandra now. Haven't been commander for 2 years." What Octavia couldn't know, was that Lysandra chose this posting for more than just peaceful reflection. Intelligence suggested someone was using veteran cemeteries across the Pacific Northwest as dead drops for stolen military technology. The carefully maintained grounds of Silvermist had become her observation post, a quiet vantage point from which to protect both the living and the dead. The serenity shattered as 3 motorcycles roared up the cemetery's main drive, their thundering engines echoing obscenely across hallowed ground. Lysandra's body tensed instinctively, years of combat training kicking in as she cataloged details with practiced precision. The lead rider's cut bore the blood-red scythe of the notorious Crimson Scythes MC. Their chapter president, Zephyr Frostbite Callahan, was known for running protection rackets. But lately, intelligence suggested they'd graduated to more sophisticated operations. "Oh no," Octavia whispered, her hands trembling slightly. "Not them again. They've been pressuring us to donate part of the grounds for their private use. The board meeting last week was just the beginning," Lysandra finished, standing slowly. Her movement was deliberately casual, but her mind was already mapping angles, calculating distances, identifying improvised weapons among the grave decorations. "How long has this been going on?" Before Octavia could answer, Frostbite and his 2 lieutenants, the towering Venom and the Serpentine Phantom, dismounted their bikes. Their heavy boots crushed the manicured grass as they swaggered between the headstones, deliberately kicking aside flower arrangements and small American flags. "Octavia, sweetheart," Frostbite called out, his scarred face twisted in what he probably thought was a charming smile. "Thought we'd stop by early. Make sure you'd reconsidered our generous offer. The county commissioner was mighty disappointed you missed the vote yesterday." Lysandra watched silently as the 3 men approached, noting how Venom's jacket bulged suspiciously on his right side. Concealed weapon, likely a .45 from the profile. Phantom carried himself with military precision despite his attempt to appear casual. Former special forces, she'd bet her life on it, which made him the most dangerous of the 3. "The board's decision was final," Octavia replied, her voice stronger than her trembling hands suggested. "This is consecrated ground. We don't sell, lease, or donate to private interests." Frostbite's fake smile vanished. "Maybe you don't understand how things work around here now, old woman. When certain people make suggestions, smart folks listen. Hate to see anything happen to all these nice, orderly graves." Lysandra moved then, positioning herself between Octavia and the bikers. The movement was subtle but deliberate, a predator shifting stance before the strike. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded elite teams on classified missions, I think you're the ones who don't understand how things work here." "Who the hell are you?" Phantom demanded, his hand drifting toward his concealed weapon. Lysandra smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just someone who believes some grounds are sacred, some sacrifices honored, and some lines you don't cross." What happened next would teach the Crimson Scythes why picking a fight in a veterans cemetery was their worst mistake, and their last one. The morning mist swirled around the gravestones as Lysandra maintained her position, analyzing the three bikers with the calculated precision that had kept her alive through countless operations. Frostbite's swagger faltered slightly as he registered something in her stance. The way she seemed to occupy the space differently than a civilian should, how her awareness extended to every angle of approach. "Look, lady," Frostbite sneered, recovering his composure. "This is a private conversation between us and the cemetery management. Why don't you go lay your flowers somewhere else before things get unpleasant?" Lysandra noted how Phantom had shifted his weight to his back foot, a telltale sign of specialized training. His eyes constantly scanned for threats, cataloging escape routes and tactical positions. Definitely ex-military, but something about his movement pattern seemed off, like he was compensating for an old injury to his right side. "I laid my flowers where they belonged," Lysandra replied evenly, gesturing to a nearby headstone. "Lieutenant Marcus Chen, Force Recon. Killed in action during an operation I led. The mission's still classified, but his sacrifice isn't. Every marker here tells a story of service, of sacrifice, and you're desecrating that sacrifice with your presence." Venom laughed, a harsh sound that echoed inappropriately across the hallowed ground. Big words from someone who's about to learn a painful lesson about minding their own business. "Oh, this is very much my business," Lysandra said, her voice taking on an edge that made Octavia step back instinctively. "You see, I've been watching your organization for a while now. The protection rackets were bad enough, but lately you've moved up to bigger games. Military tech disappearing from secure facilities. Classified intel showing up in interesting places. Using sacred ground as your dead drop location. That's what brought me here." The color drained from Frostbite's face, but he recovered quickly. "You're bluffing. You're nobody. Just some wannabe hero who's about to get hurt." "Actually," Lysandra smiled coldly, "I'm Commander Lysandra Thorne, Navy SEALs, recently attached to Naval Intelligence. And you, Zephyr Frostbite Callahan, were dishonorably discharged from the Rangers in 2019 after an incident in Kandahar that's still under investigation. Your new friend there," she nodded toward Phantom, "is former Delta Force operator Alexei Volkov, who disappeared after a classified operation went sideways in Syria. The heavy weapons you're running through veterans' cemeteries, that's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?" Phantom's hand moved toward his concealed weapon, but Lysandra's voice stopped him cold. "I wouldn't. Your draw is slow. That shoulder injury from Damascus still bothers you. By the time you clear leather, this will be over." "How do you—" Phantom started, but Frostbite cut him off with a sharp gesture. "You've got a big mouth, lady, and apparently you know things you shouldn't. But out here right now, you're alone. 3 against 1. Those aren't odds I'd bet on." Lysandra's laugh was genuine this time. "You still think this is about odds? Look around you. Every headstone represents someone who understood duty, honor, sacrifice. This ground is hallowed by their blood. And you're using it for weapons trafficking? Let me explain your options." She took a step forward, her movement causing all 3 men to tense. 1. You leave now, never come back, find a new line of work far from here. 2. You try something stupid, and I put all 3 of you in the hospital. Or 3. Her voice dropped to a deadly whisper. We find out just how many bones I can break before the groundskeeper arrives for his morning shift. You're dead, Venom snarled, reaching for his weapon. Lysandra moved before he could blink. 15 years of combat training took over as she closed the distance. Her strike to Venom's wrist sent his gun spinning away before it cleared his jacket. A precise knee to the solar plexus doubled him over, and an elbow to the base of his skull sent him sprawling unconscious among the flowers. Phantom lived up to his training, moving to flank her with professional precision. But Lysandra had already anticipated his motion, using Venom's falling body as a shield while sweeping Phantom's injured leg. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough to avoid the strike to his damaged shoulder that sent him to his knees, face contorted in pain. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Frostbite backed away, his earlier bravado evaporating as he watched his lieutenants dispatched with surgical efficiency. "This isn't over," he spat, trying to maintain some semblance of control. "You have no idea what's coming." "Actually," Lysandra replied, maintaining her ready stance, "I do. Your operation is bigger than just the Crimson Scythes. You're working for someone with serious connections. Military, intelligence, private sector. The weapons are just a cover for something bigger. The question is, are you going to be smart and work with me, or do we need to continue this discussion at the nearest trauma center?" For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Frostbite raised his hands in surrender. "We're leaving, but this isn't finished." "No," Lysandra agreed, watching as they collected their wounded and retreated to their motorcycles. "It's just beginning. And Frostbite? Next time you want to threaten someone on sacred ground, remember? Sometimes the most dangerous person in the cemetery isn't the one you can see." As the motorcycles roared away, Octavia emerged from behind a large memorial. What are you really doing here?" Lysandra watched the bikers disappear down the winding cemetery road, her mind already processing the implications of the encounter. "Protecting the dead, Octavia, and maybe preventing a few more from joining them too soon." But as she surveyed the peaceful grounds now disturbed by the morning's violence, Lysandra knew Frostbite was right about one thing. This was far from over. She'd just painted a target on her back, and if her intelligence was correct, the weapons trafficking was just the beginning of something much darker, something that reached far beyond this quiet cemetery in Stormhaven. She pulled out her phone, dialing a secure number. "Agent Blackthorne? We need to talk. The Crimson Scythes just confirmed our suspicions. Someone's using these hallowed grounds for something bigger than we thought. And I think it's time we find out exactly what they're willing to desecrate these graves to protect." Late afternoon cast long shadows across Silvermist Veterans Memorial Gardens as Lysandra sat in her weathered Jeep, watching the sun sink behind the distant mountains. She'd chosen this particular overlook carefully. It provided clear sightlines to both the cemetery's main entrance and the service road that wound through the northern section where the newest graves were located. Her encrypted phone buzzed with an incoming message from Agent Cyrus Cypher Blackthorne. Trace on Phantom's burner phone shows multiple calls to a classified DoD facility in Nevada. Whatever they're moving through those cemeteries, it's got friends in high places. The revelation didn't surprise her. During her last mission with the SEALs, an operation that had gone catastrophically wrong, she'd encountered similar patterns. Military tech disappearing, classified intel being leaked, and always a connection to seemingly legitimate operations that provided perfect cover. A knock on her window interrupted her thoughts. Major Soren Nighthawk stood there, his weathered face betraying concern. The former Special Forces operator now ran a local security firm, but his connections to the intelligence community ran deep. "Mind if I join you, Commander?" he asked, though they both knew this wasn't a casual visit. "Not if you bring coffee," Lysandra replied, noting how he continually scanned their surroundings. Old habits died hard in their line of work. Nighthawk slid into the passenger seat, handing her a steaming cup from Thornhart's Tavern. "Word travels fast in Stormhaven. Heard you had a discussion with some unwanted visitors this morning." "News to me." Lysandra took a sip of the coffee. "I just had a friendly chat with some motorcycle enthusiasts who were being disrespectful." Nighthawk's laugh held no humor. 3 broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and a severe concussion make for one hell of a friendly chat. But that's not why I'm here. He pulled out a tablet, showing her surveillance photos. "Recognize anyone?" Lysandra studied the images. High-resolution shots of Phantom meeting with someone in military dress at a private airstrip outside town. "That's General Marcus Thaddeus," she said, her voice tight. "He was in charge of the task force that investigated the Damascus incident." The same incident that got Phantom discharged and disappeared from official records, Nighthawk confirmed. This was taken 2 days ago. Whatever the Crimson Scythes are involved in, it goes way up the chain of command. Before Lysandra could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Sheriff Callista Kingsley. Got something you need to see. Meeting at Thornhart's in 20. Bring your friend with the Special Forces background. Lysandra raised an eyebrow at Nighthawk. Looks like we're needed at Maeve's place. The drive to Thornhart's Tavern and Grill was silent, both operators processing the implications of General Thaddeus's involvement. The tavern, owned by Maeve Thornhart, had become an unofficial gathering point for veterans in the area. More importantly, its back room had state-of-the-art security measures, courtesy of Nighthawk's company. They found Sheriff Kingsley waiting with Maeve in the secure room. The tavern owner's usual warm smile was replaced by a grim expression as she locked the door behind them. "Show them," Kingsley said to Maeve. Maeve pulled out a worn leather notebook. Been keeping track of unusual activities around town since the Scythes showed up. Military vehicles using back roads at odd hours, unmarked helicopters. But this morning, after your encounter with them, I saw something different. She opened the notebook to recent entries. They're not just using the cemetery as a dead drop. They're looking for something specific, something buried with one of our veterans. Lysandra's mind raced. The graves they've been pressuring Octavia to relocate. Which section are they in? Section Echo, Kingsley replied. All burials from 2019 to 2020. Damascus, Lysandra whispered. The timeline matches. Whatever went wrong in Syria, whatever got Phantom discharged, the answer's buried in one of those graves. Nighthawk leaned forward. But why pressure the cemetery board? With their connections, they could easily get legitimate authorization for disinterment. Unless what they're looking for isn't supposed to exist, Lysandra countered. Something that would implicate people much higher up than a few rogue operators and a motorcycle gang. Their discussion was interrupted by the sound of motorcycles passing outside. Through the tavern's windows, they watched a group of Crimson Scythes roll through town, their numbers significantly larger than usual. They're gathering, Maeve observed. Never seen so many of them in town at once. Lysandra's phone lit up with an urgent message from Blackthorn. Critical. General Thaddeus just cleared a no-fly zone over Stormhaven for tonight. Official reason, training exercise. Something's happening. They're making their move, Lysandra said, standing. Whatever's buried in that cemetery, they're done waiting. They're going to take it by force. Sheriff Kingsley checked her sidearm. I've got 3 deputies I trust completely. The rest are on Thaddeus's payroll whether they know it or not. We need to get to Octavia, Lysandra decided. The cemetery records might tell us exactly which grave they're targeting. I'm coming with you, Nighthawk stated. If we're dealing with corrupt military officials and rogue operators, you'll need someone who speaks their language. Maeve moved to a concealed panel in the wall, revealing a small armory. Take what you need, and Lysandra. Whatever they're looking for, whatever happened in Damascus, don't let them desecrate those graves to hide their secrets. As they geared up, Lysandra's thoughts returned to the peaceful cemetery she'd chosen as her refuge. Soon it would become a battlefield, and she was the only thing standing between corrupt forces and the hallowed ground they sought to violate. Maeve, she said, checking her weapons, keep your emergency channel open. If this goes sideways, we'll need a fallback position. The tavern owner nodded grimly. Just remember, you're not alone in this fight. Not anymore. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains as storm clouds gathered. By morning, Stormhaven would learn why some secrets are best left buried, and why desecrating hallowed ground always carries a deadly price. The storm clouds gathered ominously over Silvermist Veterans Memorial Gardens as Lysandra's jeep pulled up to the cemetery's administrative building. The Victorian-style structure, with its weathered brick and tall windows, stood as a silent sentinel over the grounds. Through the gathering darkness, they could see light still burning in Director Ravenscroft's office. Something's wrong, Lysandra muttered, her trained eye catching details others might miss. Octavia's car is at an angle. She always parks perfectly parallel to the building. Nighthawk nodded, already scanning for threats. Back door slightly ajar, they beat us here. Before they could move, Sheriff Kingsley's cruiser pulled up silently, lights off. She stepped out with 2 deputies, both veterans themselves. Perimeter's clear, she reported in a whisper. No sign of the Scythes, but we passed 3 unmarked SUVs heading toward their compound. Lysandra checked her watch. They're staging elsewhere, preparing for something bigger. Right now, we need those records. Moving with practiced precision, the group approached the building. Lysandra took point, her movements fluid and silent despite years away from active combat. At the back door, they found signs of forced entry, professional work, meant to look like amateur vandalism. Inside, the air felt wrong. Papers scattered across the floor, filing cabinets left open, but the chaos felt staged, too deliberate. Lysandra's instincts screamed ambush. "Commander," a familiar voice called from Octavia's office. "Why don't you join us? We're having a fascinating discussion about record keeping." "Phantom." Lysandra signaled the others to hold position as she approached the office. Through the doorway, she found Phantom sitting casually at Octavia's desk, while the cemetery director sat rigidly in a visitor's chair. 2 armed men in tactical gear stood guard. "Octavia," Lysandra called out. "You okay?" "I'm fine," the older woman replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "These gentlemen were just explaining why they need access to our burial records from 2019. Phantom smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Particularly interested in one grave. A Marine Corps Major, James Sullivan, died stateside but was involved in a certain operation in Damascus. Ring any bells, Commander? Sullivan, Lysandra's mind raced. He was the intelligence liaison for that mission. Official report said he died in a car accident 3 months after returning. Official reports can be so misleading. Phantom leaned forward, like the one about how he was buried with full military honors complete with a sealed casket, or the one about what really happened in Damascus. Outside, thunder rolled closer. Lysandra heard the faint sound of motorcycles in the distance. The Scythes were mobilizing. "What's in Sullivan's grave, Ian?" she demanded. "What was worth killing him for?" Phantom's smile widened. "Now that's the interesting question, isn't it? Sullivan was smart, knew he was being hunted, so he arranged for something to be buried with him. Something that would expose everything if the right people went looking. The Damascus files, Lysandra realized. He hid them in his own grave. Give the lady a prize, Phantom stood. Now we can do this 2 ways. You help us retrieve the package quietly, or we do this the hard way. Your choice, Commander. Lysandra's mind worked through scenarios. Nighthawk and the others were in position, but Phantom's men were professionals. Any firefight would put Octavia at risk. Like Damascus was my choice? She countered, buying time. When your team switched sides mid-mission, left my SEALs exposed? How many died because of your betrayal? For the first time, Phantom's composure cracked. You don't understand what's really at stake. What Sullivan discovered. It goes all the way to the top. Military contracts, black ops funding, assassination programs disguised as training accidents. The kind of truth that gets people buried in places like this. Lysandra took a careful step forward. And General Thaddeus? Where does he fit in? The general just wants to ensure certain secrets stay buried, Phantom replied. Speaking of which, your reinforcements outside should probably stand down. The Scythes aren't the only ones coming. As if on cue, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. Through the window, Lysandra saw military choppers approaching, running dark. Last chance, Commander, Phantom offered. Help us get what we need. Walk away alive. Fight us, and this peaceful cemetery becomes a war zone. Lysandra's response was instant and decisive. She triggered the flashbang grenade she'd palmed earlier, diving for cover as chaos erupted. In the confusion, she tackled Octavia to safety as Nighthawk and the deputies burst in. The firefight was brief but intense. When the smoke cleared, Phantom and one of his men had escaped through a window, leaving their wounded companion behind. You okay? Lysandra helped Octavia up. They're going to desecrate his grave, the director said, shaking with anger. Everything I've worked to protect. No, Lysandra assured her. They won't. because now we know exactly what they're after, and we're going to stop them. Nighthawk appeared in the doorway. Military units approaching from the north. Thermals show the scythes moving into position from the south. They're going to hit the cemetery from both sides. Sheriff Kingsley joined them, helping Octavia into a chair. My deputies are setting up a perimeter, but we're seriously outgunned. Lysandra moved to the window, watching as more choppers circled overhead. The storm was almost upon them, thunder and lightning creating a dramatic backdrop for the battle to come. Get Octavia somewhere safe, she ordered. Then coordinate with Maeve. We'll need her tavern as a fallback position. They think they're about to fight a simple retrieval operation. Let's show them why you don't wage war on hallowed ground. As her allies moved to execute their roles, Lysandra pulled out her phone one last time, sending a message to Blackthorn. Damascus conspiracy confirmed. Sullivan buried the evidence in his own grave. Sending coordinates. If we don't make it, make sure the truth gets out. The reply came instantly. Ghost team inbound. Hold position. The cavalry's coming. Outside, the first raindrops began to fall as lightning split the sky. Soon, this peaceful cemetery would become a battlefield. But Lysandra had fought in worse places, for lesser causes. Don't worry, Sullivan, she whispered to the gathering storm. Your sacrifice won't be in vain. Some secrets deserve to be revealed, and some hallowed grounds are worth dying to protect. Rain began to fall in earnest as Lysandra moved through the darkening cemetery, using the towering monuments and mausoleums for cover. Through her tactical earpiece, she could hear the coordinated movements of both threats. The Crimson Scythes establishing positions to the south, while Thaddeus's military units systematically secured the northern perimeter. Commander, Nighthawk's voice crackled through her comm, got thermal imaging from the overlook, counting at least 30 scythes, heavily armed. Military presence looks like 2 full tactical teams plus air support. Lysandra pressed herself against a large memorial angel as a helicopter passed overhead, its searchlight cutting through the rain. Any sign of Phantom? Negative, but Blackthorn just sent intel. Frostbite's gathering his entire chapter. Whatever's in Sullivan's grave, they're willing to start a war over it. The sound of boots on wet grass made Lysandra freeze. 2 figures in military tactical gear moved past her position, their movements precise and professional. She caught fragments of their radio chatter. ... Echo sector secure. Awaiting General's authorization. Her phone vibrated silently. A message from Sheriff Kingsley. Octavia safe at Thornhart's. She had something you need to see. Can you make it here? Negative, Lysandra replied. They're locking down the cemetery. We need to move on Sullivan's grave before they find it. She switched channels. Nighthawk, what's your position? Maintenance shed near Section Echo. Found something interesting. Fresh tire tracks by the service road. Someone's been doing recon here recently. Lightning flashed, illuminating the rows of white headstones in stark relief. In that brief moment, Lysandra caught movement near the chapel. More scythes taking up positions. But something about their formation seemed off. They're not just here for retrieval, she realized aloud. This is a cleanup operation. Once they have what they need from Sullivan's grave, they'll eliminate everyone who knows about it, Nighthawk finished, including their own people. A new voice cut through their comms, Agent Blackthorn. Commander, Ghost Team is 20 minutes out, but we've got another problem. Just intercepted orders from Thaddeus to his units. They're authorized for maximum force protocols. They're going to blame it all on the scythes, Lysandra said, the pieces falling into place. A gang war spilling onto hallowed ground, regrettable civilian casualties. The perfect cover for what really happened here. Thunder rolled overhead as she formulated a plan. Nighthawk, get to the chapel bell tower. Best vantage point for overwatch. Sheriff, can your deputies maintain the perimeter without engaging? Affirmative, Kingsley replied. But if they start desecrating graves... They won't, Lysandra assured her, because we're going to beat them to Sullivan's grave. She moved through the rain-slicked grounds with practiced stealth, her mind racing. Sullivan had known he was marked for death, had arranged his own burial to protect vital evidence. but he would have left a backup plan, a way for the right people to find it. Her earpiece crackled again. Maeve Thornhart this time. Commander, Octavia found something in the burial records. Sullivan's interment was handled by a specific funeral director, one with military connections. And get this, the casket specs don't match standard dimensions. He built in a hidden compartment, Lysandra realized. Probably thought it would stay safe until someone figured out the truth about Damascus. A burst of gunfire in the distance made her drop to the ground. Through the rain, she could see muzzle flashes near the cemetery's southern gate. The Scythes were making their move. All units be advised, Thaddeus's voice boomed through military channels that Blackthorn had helped them access. Hostile forces engaging on cemetery grounds. You are authorized to use lethal force to protect these hallowed grounds from criminal elements. Bastard's actually going to do it, Nighthawk growled from his position in the bell tower. Turn this place into a killing field just to keep his secrets. Lysandra reached Section Echo, finding Sullivan's grave marked by a simple military headstone. The rain had turned the ground to mud, but she could see signs of recent disturbance around the plot. They've already started excavating, she reported. Must have been testing the ground for the hidden compartment. Commander, Blackthorn's voice was urgent. Thermal imaging shows both forces converging on your position. You've got maybe 5 minutes before... An explosion at the main gate cut him off. Through the storm, Lysandra could see the Scythes launching their full assault, while military units moved to contain the situation. "Ghost Team, where are you?" she demanded, starting to dig at the loose soil around Sullivan's headstone. 10 minutes out, but that firefight's going to make insertion impossible. Lysandra's hands found something solid, a metal case, carefully waterproofed and buried just above Sullivan's casket. But before she could retrieve it, a familiar voice froze her in place. "I'll take that, Commander." She turned slowly to find Phantom emerging from the rain, flanked by Frostbite and several armed men. Behind them, she could see military units moving into position. "You know they're going to kill you too," she said to Frostbite. "Clean up all the loose ends." The biker gang leader smiled grimly. "Maybe. But right now, you're the one kneeling in the mud, surrounded." Lightning flashed again, and Lysandra smiled back, because in that brief illumination she'd seen something they hadn't. Figures moving silently through the darkness, taking up positions around them. "Surrounded?" she asked quietly. "Or exactly where I need to be?" The storm above intensified, nature itself seeming to hold its breath for what would come next. In a veterans' cemetery in Stormhaven, surrounded by the honored dead, a battle was about to begin that would expose decades of buried secrets. And as thunder rolled across the mountains, Lysandra prepared to show them all why some grounds were sacred enough to die protecting. Lightning split the sky as Lysandra assessed her situation with cold precision. Phantom and his men had her surrounded. Sullivan's metal case lay partially exposed in the mud, and somewhere in the darkness, unseen allies were moving into position. "Last chance, Commander," Phantom called over the storm's fury. "Hand over the case, walk away. No one else has to die here." "Like Sullivan?" Lysandra's voice cut through the rain. "Like my team in Damascus? How many more bodies need to be buried before it's enough?" Frostbite shifted impatiently, rain dripping from his leather cut. "Enough talk. Just kill her and get the..." The chapel bell tolled once, deep and resonant across the grounds. To most, it might have seemed like the storm's wind catching the bell rope, but Lysandra recognized Nighthawk's signal. Ghost Team was in position. "You know what your mistake was?" she asked, slowly rising from her kneeling position, hands raised. "You forgot where we are. This ground? It belongs to heroes, people who understood sacrifice. And they don't take kindly to those who desecrate their rest." As if in response to her words, shadows moved among the headstones. Silent figures materialized from the darkness, their movements precise and lethal. Ghost Team had arrived. The next few seconds erupted in controlled chaos. Lysandra dropped as suppressed weapons took out Phantom's rear guard. Frostbite dove for cover behind a monument, shouting orders to his scattered forces. From the bell tower, Nighthawk's precision fire forced the approaching military units to seek cover. "Commander, secure the package," a familiar voice called. Agent Blackthorne himself had come with the ghost team. "We'll hold them off." Lysandra grabbed the metal case, but Phantom was on her in an instant. His combat training showed as they grappled in the mud, neither able to maintain advantage in the slick conditions. A knife appeared in his hand, the blade catching lightning's reflection. "You don't understand," he grunted, trying to pin her down. "What's in that case? It'll destroy everything. The entire system will collapse." "Maybe it needs to." Lysandra drove her knee into his wounded shoulder, creating space to roll away. Maybe that's exactly what Sullivan wanted. The fight around them intensified. Ghost team operators engaged both Crimson Scythes and corrupt military units, while Sheriff Kingsley's deputies maintained a perimeter to protect civilians. Through her earpiece, Lysandra could hear Blackthorne coordinating with other agencies, calling in legitimate federal response teams. A massive explosion lit up the night. The Scythes had detonated something at the cemetery's main entrance. Through the chaos, Lysandra saw General Thaddeus himself arriving, surrounded by heavily armed security. "Phantom!" The general's voice boomed across the battlefield. "Secure that case at all costs. Kill anyone who—" His orders were cut short as Nighthawk's shot took out his vehicle's engine block in a shower of sparks. The general's security team scrambled for cover as more ghost operators emerged from the shadows. Phantom used the distraction to launch another attack, this time getting his hands on the case. They struggled over it, rolling between headstones as the battle raged around them. Rain and mud made every movement treacherous, every grip uncertain. "You're on the wrong side," Phantom shouted over a thunderclap. "Everything we did in Damascus, it was necessary." "The greater good." "The greater good?" Lysandra's fist connected with his jaw. "Is that what you told yourself when you betrayed your own country? When Sullivan died trying to expose the truth?" Their struggle had taken them near a fresh grave. A young Marine laid to rest just days ago. The sight of the new headstone seemed to fuel Lysandra's resolve. In a burst of strength, she broke Phantom's grip on the case, simultaneously sweeping his legs out from under him. As he fell, his head struck the corner of a marble headstone with a sickening crack. Phantom lay still, blood mixing with rain and mud. "Commander!" Blackthorne appeared at her side, covering her position. "We need to move. General's men are trying to flank us." Lysandra grabbed the case, but something made her pause. Kneeling beside Phantom's unconscious form, she checked his pulse. Still there, but weak. "Get a medic," she ordered, dragging him behind cover. "He doesn't get to die here. He faces justice for what he did." The battle was shifting. Ghost Team's precision and surprise had broken the coordination between the Scythes and military units. Frostbite was retreating with his remaining men, while General Thaddeus barked increasingly desperate orders into his radio. "Federal response teams are 10 minutes out," Blackthorne reported. "And Commander, you need to see this." He handed her a tactical tablet showing decoded transmissions. "Thaddeus isn't just trying to cover up Damascus. This cemetery operation, it's happening at other locations too. Veterans' graves being used to hide evidence, store weapons, move classified tech. They turned hallowed ground into their personal black site." Lysandra's voice was cold with rage. "Use the sacred to hide the profane." More explosions rocked the night as the Scythes made their final push to escape. Through the rain, Lysandra could see General Thaddeus organizing his remaining forces for one last attempt to secure Sullivan's case. "Commander," Nighthawk's voice came through her comm. "Whatever's in that case, it better be worth all this." Lysandra looked around at the battlefield this peaceful cemetery had become. Headstones chipped by bullets, hallowed ground torn up by explosions, the honored dead's rest disturbed by the living's corruption. "It's not about what's in the case anymore," she replied, checking her weapons. "It's about making sure this never happens again, that no one ever dares use these grounds for their schemes again." As if in agreement, thunder rolled across the mountains. The storm's fury matched the intensity of the battle below, where soldiers and operators fought among the graves of heroes. But as federal helicopters appeared on the horizon, Lysandra knew the real fight, exposing the truth and ensuring justice, was just beginning. "All units," she broadcast across all channels, Prepare for final phase. It's time to show them why you never wage war on hallowed ground. The storm raged with renewed fury as federal helicopters approached through the darkness. Lysandra clutched Sullivan's case, using a massive granite memorial for cover, as General Thaddeus's remaining forces made their desperate final push. "Commander," Blackthorne called through the tactical channel. "We've got incoming, but not all of them are friendlies. Some of those federal response units are showing recognition codes linked to Thaddeus's command." "He's got people everywhere," Lysandra realized, watching muzzle flashes illuminate the rain-soaked cemetery. How deep does this go? Through her earpiece, she heard Nighthawk's steady voice from the bell tower. "Movement at the south gate. Scythes are pulling back, but they're leaving explosives behind. They're going to try to destroy evidence by bringing down the whole section." Lightning revealed the battlefield in stark detail. Ghost team operators engaging corrupt military units while legitimate federal agents tried to sort friend from foe. Among the chaos, Lysandra spotted General Thaddeus himself, moving under heavy guard toward a waiting helicopter. "He's running," she growled. "Typical. Send others to die while he escapes." "Not this time." Blackthorne appeared beside her, his tactical gear dripping with rain. "Ghost team has something special planned for the General's extraction." As if on cue, precision shots disabled the helicopter's main rotor. Thaddeus's security detail scattered as Ghost operators emerged from the shadows, cutting off their retreat. "FBI, put down your weapons." A new voice boomed across the grounds as additional helicopters arrived, their spotlights cutting through the rain. But Lysandra noted how some of the newly arrived agents moved to support Thaddeus, rather than arrest him. "They're compromised," she told Blackthorne. "We need to—" An explosion at the south gate interrupted her. The Scythes had detonated their charges, sending fragments of the historic iron gates flying. Through the smoke and rain, more vehicles approached. Unmarked SUVs carrying what looked like private military contractors. "This is your last warning, Commander." Thaddeus's voice carried over the chaos. "That case contains matters of national security. Surrender it now." Lysandra's response was to trigger the remote detonator Nighthawk had given her earlier. Carefully placed charges disrupted the cemetery's floodlight system, plunging sections into total darkness while others remained harshly lit, perfect for Ghost Team's night-fighting tactics. "All units, execute Operation Gravekeeper," she broadcast. Authorization code, Damascus Falls. The response was immediate and devastating. Hidden Ghost Team operators revealed their positions with precise, coordinated strikes. Sheriff Kingsley's deputies, who had seemed to retreat earlier, now blocked critical escape routes, and from the direction of Thornhart's tavern came the rumble of motorcycles, but not Crimson Scythes. "Steel Knights MC at your service," a gruff voice announced over the tactical net. "Maeve said you could use some help explaining cemetery etiquette to these boys." The Steel Knights, a rival club composed largely of veterans, roared into the fight, their arrival throwing the remaining Scythes into disarray. Lysandra allowed herself a small smile. Maeve's connections had come through. "Commander," Nighthawk reported urgently, "Thaddeus is moving toward the maintenance tunnels. He's got some kind of backup plan." "He's heading for Sullivan's grave," Lysandra realized. "There's something else buried there. Something even the case won't reveal." She turned to Blackthorne. "Get this to your secure facility." She handed him Sullivan's case. "I'm going after the General." "You'll never make it across the open ground," he protested. "His forces have overlapping fields of fire and—" "Who said anything about open ground?" Lysandra was already moving toward a nearby mausoleum. "Octavia showed me the old maintenance maps. There's another way." The ancient crypt's lock yielded to her specialized tools. Inside, beneath centuries of dust, she found what the cemetery's original architects had included: access to the maintenance tunnel network that honeycombed the grounds. "Ghost Team, maintain topside pressure," she ordered, descending into the darkness. "Keep them focused on the surface fight. Nighthawk, I need thermal imaging of the tunnel network." "Already on it," his reply came with a series of uploaded blueprints to her tactical display. Multiple heat signatures converging on the central junction. They're definitely heading for something under Sullivan's section. The tunnels were a maze of brick and stone, decades of modifications creating a labyrinth beneath the peaceful grounds above. But Lysandra moved with purpose, following the path she'd memorized from Octavia's historical records. "Contact front," she whispered, spotting light ahead. Voices echoed off the ancient walls, Thaddeus and his remaining loyal officers. "Must be destroyed," she caught fragments of their conversation. "If what Sullivan buried here connects to the Damascus files." "Sir," one of his men interrupted, "FBI's securing the surface. Our window's closing." "Then dig faster," Thaddeus snarled. Sullivan didn't just hide files, he hid bodies, evidence that would tear apart the entire military contracting system. I won't let some washed-up SEAL and a bunch of ghost operators expose decades of necessary work. Lysandra had heard enough. She triggered her last flashbang, the confined space amplifying its effectiveness. As Thaddeus's men staggered, she emerged from the shadows like an avenging spirit. The fight in the tunnels was brutal and close. These weren't just soldiers. They were trained killers, men who had helped build the very system Sullivan died exposing. But Lysandra had something they didn't: the righteous fury of someone defending hallowed ground. Above, the battle continued to rage. But in these ancient tunnels, beneath the graves of heroes, a different kind of war was being fought, one for truth, justice, and the sanctity of sacrifices made. "You have no idea what you're doing," Thaddeus spat blood as Lysandra secured his hands. "The system exists for a reason. Sometimes darkness is necessary." "No," Lysandra replied, hearing federal agents finally breaching the tunnel network. "What's necessary is bringing that darkness to light. Sullivan knew it. Now everyone else will too." As legitimate FBI teams took custody of Thaddeus and his men, Lysandra looked up at the tunnel ceiling, knowing heroes rested just above. "Rest easy," she whispered. "Your graves won't be used to hide evil anymore. That's a promise." Thunder rolled overhead, but somehow it sounded different now, less like nature's fury and more like applause from those who had given their last full measure of devotion, finally seeing justice done on their hallowed ground. Dawn broke over Silvermist Veterans Memorial Gardens, its first rays illuminating the aftermath of the night's battle. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a mist that clung to the headstones like mourning shrouds. Lysandra stood at Sullivan's grave, watching federal crime scene teams carefully excavate the area beneath his casket. "You should see this, Commander," Agent Blackthorne called, holding up an evidence bag containing waterproof documents. "It's not just Damascus. Sullivan documented everything. Black sites, illegal weapons tests, assassination programs disguised as training accidents. The money trail goes back decades." Lysandra knelt by the grave, noting how carefully the FBI teams were treating the sacred ground. He knew they'd kill him for it, so he turned his own grave into the ultimate dead drop, somewhere they wouldn't dare look initially without drawing attention. "Smart," Nighthawk commented from nearby, his sniper rifle still at ready despite the relative calm. Who'd suspect a hero's grave would hold the evidence of so much corruption? The scene around them was organized chaos. Legitimate federal agents processed multiple crime scenes while ghost team operators melted away, leaving no trace of their presence. The Steel Knights MC maintained a respectful perimeter, their veterans' presence ensuring no one disturbed areas they shouldn't. Sheriff Kingsley approached, looking exhausted but satisfied. "Just finished processing the scythes we captured." Frostbite's singing like a bird, trying to cut a deal. "Says Thaddeus has similar operations in veterans' cemeteries across 3 states. "He's not lying," Blackthorne confirmed, checking his tablet. "We're getting reports of simultaneous raids happening now. Shadow units using sacred ground to hide weapons, evidence, bodies, all under the cover of military honor sections and classified veteran interments." Lysandra's phone buzzed. A message from Maeve. "Octavia's reviewing all burial records from the last 5 years. Found patterns, certain units, specific funeral homes, unusual casket specifications. This goes deeper than just Sullivan." "Of course it does," a weak voice commented. They turned to find Phantom handcuffed to a medical gurney, his head bandaged. "Sullivan just exposed one piece, the whole system. It's built on buried secrets. Lysandra approached her former adversary. Why, Phantom? You were Delta Force. You took the same oaths we did. He laughed, then winced at the pain. You still don't get it. Damascus wasn't a mission gone wrong. It was a test run, using veterans' cemeteries for black operations. It was perfect. Who'd question military honors? Who'd dare disturb a hero's rest? We would, Lysandra replied coldly. The moment you turned hallowed ground into hiding places for your crimes. More vehicles arrived, senior federal officials, military criminal investigators, even representatives from Congress. The story was too big to contain now, especially with Sullivan's evidence secured and Thaddeus in custody. Commander, a tall woman in a dark suit approached, showing credentials. Inspector General's office, we need to talk about what you found here. But before Lysandra could respond, Octavia's voice rang out across the grounds. No interviews until we restore proper respect to these grounds, the cemetery director declared, her silver hair catching the morning light. These heroes deserve better than having their resting place treated like a crime scene. To everyone's surprise, the federal officials yielded. Within hours, a remarkable transformation began. Crime scene tape came down. Evidence was collected with meticulous care for the graves around it. The Steel Knights organized other veteran groups to repair damaged headstones and restore disturbed grounds. You know this isn't over, Blackthorn said quietly as they watched the restoration work. Thaddeus had friends in high places. They'll try to bury this, claim national security. Let them try, Lysandra replied, checking her phone as more messages arrived. Ghost team operators across the country, ready to protect other cemeteries. Sullivan didn't die to have... This may have been about exposing the truth, but now it's about survival. Lysandra turned to Blackthorn. He's right. Set up surveillance on all known contractor facilities. They'll either try to destroy evidence or silence witnesses. Already done, he confirmed. Ghost teams are deploying nationwide, but we need someone to coordinate the operation, someone who understands both the tactical and sacred nature of what we're protecting. The implication was clear. Lysandra looked around at the cemetery, now bustling with respectful activity as veterans and agents worked together to restore its dignity. This place she'd chosen as a refuge had become something more, a battleground for truth, and now a launching point for a larger mission. I'll need resources, she said finally. A team I can trust. Nighthawk stepped forward. The bell tower makes a decent command center. Already got comm equipment set up. Thornhart's back room is secure, Sheriff Kingsley added. Perfect for coordinating operations. And every veterans group in 3 states is ready to help. Octavia joined them, determination in her eyes. These are our fallen. Their graves won't be used for evil again. Lysandra's phone lit up with one final message from the ghost team leader. Standing by for orders, Commander. Just say the word. She looked at Sullivan's grave, now properly restored, his sacrifice no longer in vain. All right, she decided, but we do this right. Every cemetery we protect, every truth we uncover, it's all done with respect for those who rest here. As if in answer, the morning sun broke fully through the mist, illuminating thousands of white headstones standing in eternal formation. Somewhere out there, other sacred grounds were being used to hide darkness. But now they had a defender, someone who understood that some things were worth protecting, some truths worth dying for, and some grounds, truly, were sacred. First priority, Lysandra announced, is setting up a network of veterans at every national cemetery. No more secret operations, no more hidden evidence. These grounds belong to heroes. It's time we proved worthy of protecting their rest. The others nodded, understanding that this was just the beginning. The Knights' battle had exposed a cancer in the system, but the real fight, ensuring it never happened again, was just beginning. And as morning colors were raised over Silvermist Veterans Memorial Gardens, Lysandra smiled, knowing that somewhere, Sullivan was resting easier, his mission finally complete. 1 week after the battle at Silvermist Veterans Memorial Gardens, Lysandra sat in the converted Bell Tower Command Center, reviewing reports from across the country. The old chapel's Gothic architecture provided natural cover for the array of surveillance and communication equipment now monitoring veteran cemeteries nationwide. "Got another one," Nighthawk announced, marking a point on their digital map. Arlington National Cemetery, Section 60. Private security contractors trying to access restricted areas under the guise of maintenance work. Lysandra studied the pattern emerging on the display. They're getting desperate. 3 attempts in different cemeteries this week alone. They're trying to clean up whatever evidence is still out there. The door opened as Agent Blackthorne entered, carrying fresh intelligence files. "It's worse than that. We've identified shell companies linked to Thaddeus's operation buying land adjacent to veteran cemeteries in 5 states. They're building their own infrastructure around these sacred sites." "Hiding in plain sight," Lysandra muttered, reviewing satellite imagery. "Using legitimate military honors as cover for their operations, just like Sullivan discovered." Her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from the Ghost team leader. "Contractor movement detected near Quantico National Cemetery. Heavy equipment being staged under civilian company names." Before she could respond, Sheriff Kingsley burst in. "You need to see this," she said, activating the main screen. Security footage showed unmarked vans entering multiple veteran cemeteries simultaneously across the country. "They're coordinating," Nighthawk observed. "This isn't just cleanup anymore. They're implementing some kind of contingency plan." Lysandra's mind raced, connecting dots. "Pull up Sullivan's files again, specifically anything about contractor protocols." Blackthorne quickly accessed the decoded documents from the case they'd recovered. Here, something called Operation Eternal Guard. Details are redacted, but it mentions using cemetery infrastructure for— My God. "What?" Kingsley demanded. "They weren't just hiding evidence in graves," Lysandra read over his shoulder. "They were building a shadow network, underground facilities, secure communication hubs, weapons caches, all disguised as part of cemetery operations." The implications were staggering. Every military cemetery could potentially be part of a massive hidden infrastructure, all operating under the perfect cover of sacred ground. "Commander?" Maeve's voice came through the comm system. "Got movement at Thornhart's. 3 SUVs just pulled up. Private military types asking questions about the battle here last week." "They're trying to contain the story," Blackthorne said. "Local level first, then work their way up." Lysandra accessed the tavern's security feeds, studying the contractor's behavior. "No, they're mapping our network, trying to identify everyone who helped us expose Sullivan's evidence." As if confirming her analysis, reports began flooding in from their newly established veteran contacts nationwide. Similar teams were appearing in towns near military cemeteries, asking questions, applying pressure. "They think if they can intimidate enough people, they can still bury this," Nighthawk growled. "Make it disappear like everything else they've hidden in sacred ground." "Not this time." Lysandra stood, decision made. "Blackthorne, activate all ghost teams. Full surveillance on every national cemetery. Kingsley, coordinate with veteran groups. I want eyes on every private contractor facility within 50 miles of these grounds." "What about the ones already here?" Maeve asked through the comm. A cold smile crossed Lysandra's face. "Let's show them why you don't threaten people who protect hallowed ground. Nighthawk, get the Steel Knights on standby. Time these contractors learned about small-town hospitality." Within hours, their response was in motion. As contractor teams attempted to gather intelligence, they found themselves facing walls of silence, backed by veterans who understood the true meaning of sacred duty. The Steel Knights conducted routine patrols that just happened to disrupt surveillance operations. "Commander," Blackthorne reported, monitoring communications. "They're pulling back, regrouping at their staging areas. But something's not right. These teams are too well equipped for simple intimidation work." Lysandra studied their movement patterns. "Because intimidation isn't their primary mission. They're probing our defenses, testing response times. This is reconnaissance for something bigger." Her phone lit up with a message from Octavia. "Found more irregularities in burial records. Certain contractors had unlimited access to restricted areas. Dates correspond with major classified technology transfers. The cemeteries aren't just hiding places, Lysandra realized. They're transfer points, using funeral processions and military honors as cover to move sensitive materials. Smart, Nighthawk admitted grudgingly. Who'd question a military funeral procession? The perfect cover for moving anything they want between secure facilities. A new alert flashed on their screens. Drone footage showing heavy equipment being moved toward multiple cemetery locations under cover of darkness. They're accelerating their timeline, Blackthorne observed. Whatever they're planning is already in motion, Lysandra finished. They're not trying to clean up evidence anymore. They're activating their entire network. She turned to her team, determination clear in her voice. Get me everything on pending military funerals nationwide. Contractor movements, security details, everything. If they're using these sacred ceremonies as cover, we need to identify which ones are legitimate and which ones are part of their operation. And then, Kingsley asked, then we remind them why some grounds are sacred, some truths can't be buried, and some defenders never stop fighting for what's right. As her team mobilized, Lysandra looked out over the peaceful cemetery grounds below. Somewhere out there, a shadow network was preparing to use hallowed ground for their dark purposes. But this time, they'd face an enemy they never expected. One who understood that true sacred duty meant protecting both the dead and the truth they died preserving. The battle for Silvermist had been just the beginning. The real war, for every sacred cemetery and the honor they represented, was about to begin. The next 48 hours transformed their chapel command center into a hub of feverish activity. Intelligence feeds from ghost teams across the country filled multiple screens, while veteran groups reported contractor movements near dozens of military cemeteries. Pattern confirmed, Blackthorne announced, highlighting clusters on their main display. Military funeral processions scheduled at 17 different national cemeteries over the next week. Cross-referencing with Sullivan's files shows 8 of them match known contractor transport protocols. Lysandra studied the data, her trained eye catching details others might miss. They're not just moving materials anymore. Look at the security details. These are extraction teams. They're pulling everything out of their cemetery networks before we can expose them. Nighthawk zoomed in on satellite imagery showing convoy preparations. Heavy equipment, specialized transport vehicles, teams with tactical gear. Whatever they're moving, they're not taking chances. Because it's not just weapons or tech, a new voice joined them. They turned to find Phantom in the doorway, escorted by federal agents. The former Delta operator looked haggard but determined. It's evidence, proof of everything. The black ops, the assassinations, the money trails. Why are you here? Lysandra demanded, noting how the ghost team operators silently adjusted their positions for better firing angles. Because you were right, Phantom replied simply. What we did, what I helped do, it was wrong. Using heroes' graves to hide our sins. Sullivan tried to tell me before they killed him. Blackthorne checked his tablet. He's been cooperating. Provided actionable intelligence on contractor operations in 3 states. They're calling it Protocol Eternal Silence, Phantom continued. Complete evacuation of all cemetery facilities. Anything they can't move gets destroyed. They'll sanitize every site, eliminate every witness, bury the truth so deep it never sees light. As if confirming his warning, Sheriff Kingsley burst in. Multiple reports coming in. Private security teams showing up at homes of cemetery employees. Veteran group leaders, anyone connected to these grounds. They're not just making threats anymore. Lysandra's phone buzzed. A message from Maeve. 3 men just tried to access Thornhart's back room. Steel Knights ran them off, but they'll be back. These aren't regular contractors. They're cleaners. They're trying to cut off our network, Nighthawk observed grimly. Isolate each cemetery before they begin major operations. Lysandra moved to the main tactical display. Decision made. Not if we cut them off first. Blackthorne, get me secure channels to every ghost team. Kingsley, activate our veteran response groups. Nighthawk, I want Overwatch positions established at all targeted cemeteries. What's the play, Commander? Phantom asked. genuine respect in his voice. We let them think their intimidation is working. Make them believe we're backing off, giving them space to operate. Meanwhile, we document everything. Every vehicle, every team, every piece of equipment they try to move through these grounds. Her phone lit up with another message. Agent Cypher from their intelligence network. Contractor command and control center identified. Private compound outside Arlington. Heavy security, but blueprints show vulnerabilities. That's their headquarters, Phantom confirmed, where they coordinate all cemetery operations. Take that out, you disrupt their entire network. Blackthorne looked skeptical. It'll be a fortress. Even with ghost teams, we'd need an army? Lysandra smiled coldly. Look outside. They moved to the bell tower's windows. Below, vehicles were arriving at Silvermist. Trucks, cars, motorcycles. Veterans from across the state responding to the call to protect sacred ground. The Steel Knights directed traffic as more arrived, each group bringing skills earned in service to their country. They thought they could intimidate a few cemetery workers and veteran groups, Lysandra said quietly. Instead, they're about to face everyone who ever swore an oath to protect these grounds. Her phone buzzed again. Octavia this time. Found it. Hidden bunker network beneath Section 60. Maintenance tunnels lead to underground command center, sending blueprints. They built their command center under Arlington itself, Phantom shook his head. Hidden in plain sight, using America's most sacred military cemetery as cover. The arrogance. And their biggest mistake, Lysandra studied the blueprints. Because now we know where to strike. One operation, perfectly coordinated, hits their command structure while ghost teams secure every cemetery they're trying to evacuate. They'll have contingencies, Blackthorne warned. Dead man switches, data purges. Let them try. Lysandra activated the main comm system. All units, this is command. Implementation of Operation Sacred Trust is now authorized. I say again, Sacred Trust is a go. Across the country, ghost teams and veteran groups moved into position. Surveillance was established on every targeted cemetery, every contractor facility, every transport route they might use. Remember, Lysandra broadcast to all units, we're not just protecting graves, we're defending the truth these grounds were meant to hide. For Sullivan, for every hero they used as cover for their crimes, we make this right. As her orders were acknowledged, she turned to her core team. Blackthorne, coordinate ghost team insertions. Nighthawk, get our snipers in place. Kingsley, your deputies secure evacuation routes for cemetery personnel if this gets hot. And me? Phantom asked quietly. Lysandra studied him for a long moment. You help us end this. Make amends for what you were part of, starting with everything you know about their command center's defenses. Outside, more vehicles arrived as veteran groups established their presence at every targeted cemetery. The contractors would find no easy evacuations, no simple cleanup operations. This time, they faced defenders who understood the true meaning of sacred duty. They'll move soon, Phantom warned, reviewing tactical data. Once they realize what we're preparing, let them. Lysandra checked her weapons. Because this time we're ready, and they're about to learn why you never wage war on hallowed ground. Thunder rolled in the distance as storm clouds gathered once again over Silvermist. But this time, the coming storm would wash clean these sacred grounds, exposing long-buried truths to the light of justice. The real battle for America's hallowed grounds was about to begin. Storm clouds gathered over Arlington National Cemetery as Lysandra and her ghost team moved silently through the pre-dawn darkness. Above ground, thousands of white headstones stood in eternal formation. Below, in hidden tunnels never meant to see light, a shadow war was about to begin. All teams in position, Blackthorne's voice came through her secure communication. Contractor forces moving exactly as predicted. They're starting cemetery evacuations under cover of scheduled funeral processions. Lysandra checked her tactical display, showing real-time movements across multiple locations. Ghost teams, maintain surveillance only. Let them start their operations. We take them all at once. Behind her, Phantom moved with the quiet precision of his Delta Force training. now turned against his former employers. Command Center security includes former Special Forces, CIA paramilitaries. They won't go down easy. They went down the moment they chose to desecrate these grounds, Lysandra replied, leading them deeper into the maintenance tunnels. Her thermal imaging revealed the hidden infrastructure built beneath America's most sacred military cemetery. Secure rooms, communication centers, weapons caches. "Commander," Nighthawk's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Got eyes on the primary target. General Maxwell arrived at the command center 10 minutes ago. Looks like a full leadership meeting. Perfect. The architect of the entire cemetery network, gathering his conspirators in one place. Their arrogance would be their downfall." "Confirmed movement at all targeted locations," Sheriff Kingsley reported from Silvermist. "Contractor teams attempting to access restricted areas. Steel Knights and veteran groups are politely delaying them." Lysandra allowed herself a grim smile, imagining how those polite delays were being implemented. "All units hold position. Wait for my signal." They reached the final approach to the hidden command center. Through the tunnel walls, they could hear muffled voices, General Maxwell addressing his gathered subordinates. "Accessing their internal feed," Blackthorne announced. Maxwell's voice came through their comms. "Complete evacuation of all sites. Every piece of evidence, every record, every trace of our operations removed or destroyed. Shadow Site Protocol is now in effect. Use whatever force necessary to—" "Commander," a new voice cut in, Maeve from Thornhearts. "They just tried to breach the tavern's secure room. Steel Knights repelled them, but they're escalating, using military-grade equipment." Similar reports began flooding in from other locations. The contractors were done with subtle intimidation, moving to aggressive containment. "They're desperate," Phantom observed, "trying to eliminate everyone who knows about their operation before—" An explosion rocked the tunnel network. Emergency lights flicked on as alarms blared. "Perimeter breach," Maxwell's voice shouted. "How did they—" "Now," Lysandra ordered. "All units execute." Across the country, ghost teams and veteran groups launched coordinated strikes on every contractor operation attempting to evacuate cemetery facilities. At Arlington, Lysandra's team breached the command center in a perfectly choreographed assault. The fight was brutal but brief. The contractors were skilled, but they'd never faced opponents who understood both their tactics and the sacred nature of the ground they'd desecrated. "Clear," Phantom announced, securing Maxwell as other ghost operators subdued the remaining leadership. "You have no idea what you've done," Maxwell spat as Lysandra approached. "Everything we built, everything we protected, was built on the graves of heroes," she cut him off. "Use their sacrifices to hide your crimes. That ends today." Her phone buzzed with updates from across the country. Contractor teams neutralized. Evidence secured. The entire shadow network exposed to the light. "Commander," Blackthorne called urgently. "They triggered some kind of deadman switch. Data servers are purging." But Lysandra smiled. "No, they're not. Because we already have everything. Ghost teams accessed their systems days ago. Every file, every record, every dark secret they tried to bury with our heroes. It's all been documented." Maxwell's face went pale as he realized the full scope of their operation. "How?" "Sullivan wasn't the only one who knew the truth," she replied. "Others kept records, waited for the right moment, and you gave it to us when you tried to use these sacred grounds for your schemes." Outside, the storm broke. Rain fell on Arlington's hallowed ground as federal agents moved in to take custody of Maxwell and his conspirators. Ghost teams secured evidence from hidden facilities, while veteran groups stood watch, ensuring no contractor forces could interfere. "All targeted locations secured," Nighthawk reported. "Contractor teams in custody or retreating. Their entire network is exposed." Lysandra moved through the command center, seeing the full scope of their operation. Monitors showed feeds from hidden cameras in cemeteries across the country. Maps detailed their secret infrastructure. Files documented decades of classified operations using military honors as cover. "What happens now?" Phantom asked quietly. Now, she replied, we make sure this never happens again. Every cemetery they used, every grave they desecrated, we restore them, protect them, honor them as they should have been honored all along. Her phone lit up with a final message from Blackthorne. Senate Intelligence Committee briefed. Joint Chiefs launching full investigation. This goes public tomorrow. Good. Lysandra looked up at the overhead maps showing their network of veteran defenders across the country. Let everyone see how they used sacred ground to hide their sins, and let them see how real warriors stood up to protect hallowed ground. As federal teams began processing the scene, Lysandra stepped out of the hidden command center. Above, Arlington's endless rows of white headstones gleamed in the morning sun, breaking through the storm clouds. It's over, she whispered to the heroes resting there. Your graves won't be used to hide darkness anymore. That's a promise. Thunder rolled one final time, like distant artillery fire. But this time, it sounded like approval from those who had given their last full measure of devotion, finally seeing their sacred rest protected, as it should have been all along. The shadow war for America's hallowed grounds was over. The light had won. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.